welcome you guys. We're glad to have you here. Thank you for being with us on this Friday. For those of you who are here in Colorado, thanks for braving the cold. For those of you who are across the country, I hope you're ready for your Friday to start.
We can go ahead, Sherrie and Cindy, if you'd like.
Okay, well, hello, good morning, our last Mojo. Sherrie and I meet after the day is over to discuss what we're going to say in our Mojo. And so we're no longer having our 7:30 p.m. date anymore because this is our last one. Yesterday, Kelly and Michelle gave us great information from History Colorado. Two things that stood out to me was the exhibits that you can go on and see exhibits virtually, Lincoln Hills and the Utes. But there's also overlooked stories, and that would be awesome for kids doing National History Day. Sherrie, what did you think?
And I didn't know about podcasts. That's something to tap into. We're kind of things, even those of us who feel about that, but there's always new tidbits. So thanks to Michelle and Kelly for sharing that. We had our on-demand session on yellow journalism, which was really great. Keith and Kyle and Raleigh did that. I enjoyed learning about the yellow kid. That's always a fun story. And I was also introduced to a term that was new to me, which was lateral reading. And that tied in well with Sam Weinberg's class.
And something I learned, Google Slides. In Google Slides, you can copy like a slide 10 times, and then you can zoom in on various aspects of the primary source to highlight them. So I haven't tried it yet, but apparently it's very easy to do. We then moved on to the National History Day, and just wanted to repeat their website is National History Day Colorado, and lots of resources for teachers and kids. And Sherrie, do you want to talk about the performance?
Yeah, at the end they had a bonus feature with a performance by 3 kids, and it was great. I actually had to pull my husband over and say, "Come here, you got to see this." So that was a nice addition. So History Colorado, History Day, National History Day is something that if you haven't done it before, be sure to check it out, because I think it's a great resource to use with kids.
And then there was Sam. Gave us all kinds of fabulous information. One thing he kept mentioning was CORE, C-O-R, which stands for Civic Online Reasoning. And during the question period, he talked about some work they're doing, testing CORE and regular classwork to compare who's more effective at fact checking. So if you haven't been to SHAG, be sure to go and look at the Civics Online Reasoning piece.
And again, his talk about the lateral reading, and I appreciated the hands-on time to be able to go and actually get on those sites and see what was there and try that attack. And his comments about Wikipedia, when I was still in Nextworthy, and of course that has all changed, and kudos to Wikipedia as being a valid resource, but you have to, verify things in lots of other ways. So great presentation. Sam's always full of inspiration.
Yes, I felt great relief because I had been using Wikipedia but not admitting to it. So now that's off my shoulders. I can admit to using Wikipedia. Today, we have more great things coming up. Sherrie is going to do a Codex lesson. We've been hearing a lot about it, people people are asking about it in the chat, so we're looking forward to that at 8. Our 9 o'clock on-demand session, making primary sources access through levels of learning. Our brown bag session, you will love this, is Mary Johnson doing the TPS Teachers Network, which if you've not signed up, you need to sign up, because every support you need for your classroom and the Library of Congress, you'll find it there. She's a master. And finally, at 5 o'clock, we have educator, artist, and public speaker Tanaya Winder, who's going to talk about the Heart Work Remembering on Fire. So that should be really great. Don't forget, go to the exhibitors, fill out your polls, complete your surveys. Don't forget to goose chase. We had a book winner last night, Ryan Davidson, so congratulations to him. And have I left anything out?
You know, I just want to share this
Good.
shared resource list that we're creating for TLD, and I'll put the link here too. It's not complete because it's a Google Doc, but it'll contain all of the resources and links to the YouTube videos, etc. Everything that the speakers have talked about. We'll put it all on this Google Doc here. So check back after the conference as well if you're wanting some more resources from the conference.
And there we have Jolene Gutierrez still ahead on Goose Chase. So today's your last chance to take over and be number 1. So don't forget to do that. Anybody have anything else? Okay, if nothing else, we're going to move to Sherrie, and she's going to do a Codex lesson, which is amazing. So Sherrie, you're on.
Hi, well, welcome. Some of you may be familiar with this talk. It's a version of what we did early spring when we did our online classes. So just from taking a look at this, turkey, chili peppers, and corn, if I asked you what subject you think this lesson would have to do with, you might think it was cooking. And you might not be too far off, but as we get into it, you'll learn a little bit more. Huedo Cinco Codex originated in Mexico. Again, we're going to kind of use the analysis tool as a format. I'm sure most of you are familiar with that. If you're not, please send us a text and we'll get you some more information. Let's see. Are we going to go? Yeah. Okay, great. So observe, reflect, question. What do you see? What do you think? And what questions do you have? And of course, our who, what, when, where, why. So we're going to just quickly jump into the one of the documents. This is on early paper, and this is what it is. What do you see? And if someone can help me with watching the chat, I'm not seeing that. But on the front, the title page, I mentioned turkeys. Do you see turkeys?
There are turkeys. We've got chili in the chat that have been mentioned a couple times.
Chili. Okay, great. What else do you see?
Carrots and some bird-looking things.
Okay, carrots and some bird-looking things. So carrots, obviously you're referring to your prior knowledge that you know that carrots are shaped like a triangle and are orange. So that's a really good observation. And the bird type things, those are turkeys. I'll just give you that right off the bat. And then does anybody see corn?
We did mention corn. We also have sweet potato and circles and brick walls. And somebody
All right.
said chocolate chip cookies.
Okay, and I almost always have someone mention chocolate chip cookies on the top there. Since this is a historic document from way back, we probably could rule out chocolate chip cookies, but why not? Let's just roll with it. And then underneath those symbols that we can tell are turkeys and corn and chocolate chip cookies and maybe some cross-hatching and chili peppers, we've got some other diagrams or forms or something that represent something at different shapes. So these are the actual items. And then if we go to the next slide, you'll see that there's some repeating symbols that have the items, the corn, the chilies on top of them. What could these represent? And what would be the purpose of these documents that have all of this stuff drawn on it? Comments from the chat?
Flags identifying the crops. One thing looks like a cleaver. Maybe it's ways of counting things.
Okay, so someone mentions weighings. I wonder what makes them.
We don't have a response quite yet in chat, so we're hanging out.
Okay. But I think that's good for us to try to understand people who come up with observations or comments about what it might be. Where did they get that idea? What's the source of that? What makes them think it's something to count? And I think it's always good for some of us to see how other people think and to share that process. So what would be the purpose of this document? Any comments in chat?
To keep track of resources, maybe. We've got that from two different people. Rachel and Danae brought that in. Back to Jolene, she actually mentioned that this may be used to count things. It just came through. So I think keeping track of resources is the biggest comment.
Okay, so it might be that they're keeping track of their pantry to make sure that they have adequate supplies. It might be that they're keeping track of how many crops were raised so that they're looking for the future. I like the idea that this first symbol could be a cleaver or it could be a flag. Again, we're trying to make meaning out of something that we haven't observed before and trying to understand it, just like what historians do when they look at items and trying to make sense of it. So if we go to the next slide, I'm going to give you the hint right away. I'm not going to make you struggle too long. I might let students struggle a little longer, but this was a math computation system. And that flag or cleaver represented 20. And this is a base 20 system. So that first one was 20 times 1. That's what that represented. The second, which looks like a bundle of twigs, is 20 times 20, which would be 400. And then that last little one, which looks like a picture frame, or it could be a pouch or a bag, is 20 times 20 times 20, which is 8,000. So now, fortunately, we had historians that knew this and could share this information. But from the chat, Michelle?
I'm so sorry. And all of a sudden there's excitement in the chat that's like, oh, I get it. Oh, so wonderful. So yay, you just opened up a whole piece in inquiry. So it's in the chat. I just wanted to make sure you heard that.
That's great. Well, and we know from working with primary sources to let people struggle a little bit and make meaning. Then once you do share some information, which you don't want to give away too much, but you have to, obviously nobody would have probably come up with this, but once you share it, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, eureka, I get it now. And it has more meaning to you. So if we go to the next slide, this is a lesson plan that's on the library's website. It's one of the few lesson plans that you'll find in the teacher page lesson plan resources that deals with math. Obviously, math is somewhat of a challenge with a lot of primary sources. And so this is a worksheet, so students can go back and look for how many turkeys were there. Did they have a flag over them? Did they have a bundle of sticks, or were they in the picture frame bag? And do the calculations and tabulate what was on that sheet. So if we go to that next page, we can look back at that sheet now, and we can see that the 20 was for the turkeys, and then we have the answer sheet. So corn was the bundle of 400. So each one of those symbols would have been 400. And then that picture frame, those are the tiny, tiny things. When you look at 16,000 chili peppers were documented in that image. So an activity sheet, which isn't too complicated, but gives the students a chance to do some tabulation. Now, there were 3 pages like this one in this set of documents. The rest of the documents weren't necessarily conducive to the lesson, so we just pulled out part of it when we put this lesson together as part of an exhibit at the Library of Congress that uses these items. So if we go to the next slide, the Nahua Indians of Huedo Cinco were in just east of Mexico City, and they were an ally of Cortez. And this is kind of an overview document that tells you a little bit about the story. But basically, they went to court because they were overtaxed by the new Spanish government. And Cortez supported them in going to court, and they won. They had a documentation of how much they were overtaxed by these documents. And these documents held up in a court of law. And they were used in this case. Now the rest of the story isn't really documented completely, but apparently one of the experts at the library was doing a lesson or putting together resources about an exhibit for Christopher Columbus for 1992, and had come across documents in Spain, and it mentioned Huedo Cinco. And he was like, what? And actually found that the court case was retried in Spain after they won in Mexico, and they won. And so it lends the story to we don't necessarily have to solve conflicts with war or with violence. We can go through a court of law. And this document was created in 1521. So when we think that far back, it's pretty inspiring to think how we can solve conflicts and work together. So if we go to the next slide, any questions that pop up?
We don't have any quite here yet.
Okay, well, if they pop up, just interrupt, we'll go on. This is the lesson plan that's on the teacher page. It's this Huedo Cinco Codex, but if you go to classroom materials and put in Codex, I think it will pop right up, or if you put in math. Under classroom materials, there's also a way that you can look at time periods. So this would be a time period for world history. I worked with this when I was at the Library of Congress as a teacher in residence, and this exhibit was about to open. And I was to find 3 different exhibit items that I could build some lessons around. And this one intrigued me. I loved the little symbols. But I worked with it for a long time, and I still can't write the word Huedo Cinco without having to look it up. So don't try to remember it. It's too difficult. One of the other factors about this document, there were 8 pages, I believe, and the one that's shown here on the screen with the lesson plan was not one of the ones that I used for the lesson because the lesson was focusing on math. But this document is famous for this banner that they made out of feathers, and it was the first depiction of the Madonna from the New World in Mexico. So just an aside, there's lots of other details that you could get with the rest of the documents, and they're included in the plan. I just wanted to highlight those for you this morning. I think I have one more slide, do I? Yes. So teacher page blogs, you can get more information. Here is an image of Dr. Everett Larson holding the codex so you can see an actual size and how big it is. I think this might be a facsimile as opposed to the real thing, but they're accurate with their sizes. The teacher page blog is a great place to go when you're looking for something specific, and we're kind of branching out into STEM and STEAM. That's a great place to look for other suggestions of primary sources that you can use in the STEM and STEAM areas. Just typing in STEM in the blog, I found 98 items, 64 on math, 41 on engineering. So there's a lot of great resources that you can find on the blog, on the Codex, as well as other STEM and STEAM resources. And there are webinars, lots of webinars. A lot of times I'll just go straight to YouTube and then search Library of Congress and then do a search from there. But there's supplemental materials that you could use with students if you did, that they could learn a little bit more about how this document has impacted the poet laureate, for example, and how it's a part of the top treasures of the Library of Congress. Let's see. Oh, and this is the top treasures, which was an exhibit that went on for years and years, and they highlighted some of the amazing treasures of the library. You can see from this image that one with the Madonna, and then at the bottom was another document that was fabric that they made that was part of how they were overtaxed. Okay, I think we've got one more. Oh, Jay Kislak collection exhibition, Exploring the Early Americas, also talks about this and talks more about the numbering system and identifying what the some of the symbols were. No chocolate chip cookies. Okay, so in addition to this lesson, and Michelle, real quick, any questions on this specifically?
No, but I will say that it's been great. Laura has placed in the actual lesson for you. And then additionally, Mary suggested some blogs from the Library of Congress that actually talk about teaching math. So we are keeping our resource list live, and we're putting those links in the TLD resource list for you all. So in addition to the things you've mentioned, Sherrie, we've had those additions in the chat, but no questions. So go ahead and keep going.
Well, I had a couple other things that I wanted to highlight. For engineering, the HABS HAIR, and that's HABS/HAER, which stands for Historic American Building Survey and Historic American Engineering Record. And they've also started doing Historic American Landscape Surveys. But for engineering, this is an amazing resource where they hired architects and engineers during the Depression to actually go in and document building structures, and there's drawings, and it's incredible. So for any of you looking for engineering resources, that's a great place to go. Primary source sets on the library's webpage, the Wright brothers, data, understanding the coast, weather forecasting, again, would be STEM and STEAM. And then last, but definitely not least, is the TPS Teachers Network. There are groups around STEM, around arts, and lots of resources. So if you're not a member of the network, I would encourage you to join that network, take a look. There's tons of different groups that you could tap into, and people that you could contact if you're looking for something specific, or if you're needing some help. So the network would be probably my prime resource that I would direct you to. So I know that the rest of the team has lots of other resources that you might want to share or highlight on STEM and STEAM. So anybody else want to chime in?
I would pop in and mention that it's great to see the little known features of STEM and STEAM. There are many highlights throughout the teaching resources, but also with the Library of Congress for lessons. Really dig into some of the HABS, HAL, and HAIR. That's going to give you some wonderful in-depth engineering, just as you mentioned, Sherrie. And as we also look to connect primary sources to trades, as that growth field continues to move for our students, we know a lot of our students connect with primary sources in lots of different ways. Trades are part of STEM, and the Library of Congress offers many different resources in regards to plans, visual images, and all of those types of things that can be used in a traditional classroom setting, but also in a hands-on trade classroom setting as well. So I'd encourage you to think of how the Library of Congress can connect to STEM in that way.
And lots of resources on the other reason, just the Library of Congress building, an incredible resource, but the arts there is, tons of things on mosaics, on sculptures, on the structure of the building, all of that. So great. Anyone else with something to share?
Yeah, sure.
Otherwise, I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah, Sherry, this is Keith. I just wanted to share, not to overlook, and I know this is one of your favorite areas, is just looking in the map collections in general on the Library of Congress. And some of the favorites there, like the bird's eye maps, which show a great, if you're looking at urban planning and just the growth over time of city centers, that they were very popular especially during the late 18th or 19th century, those. But one of my most favorites, especially for STEM and engineering, is looking in the Sanborn fire insurance maps, which are a set of maps that were made late 19th, early 20th century that inventoried cities and their infrastructure, which is incredibly important for doing engineering and that kind of work. My wife's an engineer, and I know that occasionally they'll go back and look at that to see what historically might have been in places, because it wasn't really inventoried in a lot of places that they have access to it. But those for fire insurance, they went and actually did that. So it's actually, and you can search your city, town, and look what was there in the past, and it's a very interesting resource.
Can you believe I went through a whole session and didn't mention maps?
Yeah,
What?
so I thought I would at least give you permission to.
Thank you. The nice thing about those fire insurance maps too is they were updated every 10 years. So you can really see over time how a building changed from wood to brick and how additions were added on, and yeah, fun stuff.
Well, I think to connect them, Sherry, also in that STEM context, to connect them with the panoramic photos and also those maps the railroad maps and those large scale visual maps, to compare the Sanborn in 2D to some of the 3D drawings that were done in those panoramic pieces, makes for a real learning experience, especially when you can get kids out in the field to actually see where some of those buildings still are. We did a great really examination of this in Denver, but also I would encourage you to take a look at the Columbia Exposition work. We actually at NCSS several years ago worked with engineering and the maps and all of these different pieces with a book and literature and tying it to lit. I know it was really great because Kent mentioned in the chat that there's a great book as well that's a resource, Zero, the biography of a dangerous idea. We're going to put that in the resource list, and it's a great way to learn math and history too. So thanks, Kent, for sharing that in the chat. We appreciate it.
Okay, so any final questions and answers for the whole conference or the whole group? Anybody writing into chat? Any other, do we want to share anything about the conference wrap up and what our plans are?
Sure, we got Goose Chase is going to go until the end of the day, until the end of the keynote. So be sure to get in there and compete if you want to compete for the amazing Chromebooks and printers. So we'll be announcing those after the keynote. And please join us for Tanaya Winder tonight. She's going to be amazing and be a real revitalization of our heart and our heart work. Some good social emotional type learning. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.